Welcome back to this week's Inside the Garage. We've got the 76 Vet. The 76 Vet in. We did discuss with the client sort of details. One thing I'm noticing on the test drive is we've got some play in the steering wheel. We're gonna have to get that corrected. I'm also hearing a shudder from the rear end when we take off or when we accelerate, which is not a good thing. And the other thing too is I'm starting to notice the temperature gauge is starting to climb. With all that shimmying going on with the steering wheel during the test drive, we're going to get the tire off and examine the front end of this vehicle. During the inspection of the front end of this 76 Vet, we immediately noticed that the lower ball joint had a lot of play, along with these control arm bushings being cracked. That'll cause a clunk, that'll also cause some play in the steering. So after removing this hub assembly, it's pretty much nuts and bolts, just sheer labor, nothing fancy, comes out pretty smoothly. We're after changing out those ball joints, and those ball joints are really key. They need to keep this spindle, this hub assembly stable. What'll happen is this rubber boot over time will start to break and tear, and then you start losing the vital grease. And that grease is really key in maintaining lubrication to this joint. You can see how loose that is. You can imagine with several hundred pounds on the vehicle what that's doing to the tire wear, and also a little bit of play in the steering wheel that you may have, or some vibration. So we just got our ball joints in. Front end is coming together really well. We're actually going to use this Pro Cut on-car brake lathe. It's a pretty cool brake lathe. We can actually mount this to the rotor, get the rotor cut. Now listen, if we had to do wheel bearings or we had a leaky wheel seal on this top hat style brake rotor, that's something we wouldn't be doing. This on-car brake lathe would actually take that rotor off and replace those bearings, or at least repack with a new seal. One of the key factors when you're spinning these brake rotors, you want to make sure the minimum thickness is to specification. If those rotors are too thin, you're going to have other problems. Your brake pedal is going to travel too much, and you may not have that increased stopping power as you should when you replace those brake pads. On this particular rotor, we're going to take off about 2 to 3 thousandths off the rotor itself. We'll still be within minimum specification, and we'll have a great stopping power with this brake system. One of the other symptoms that we're going to handle on this Corvette, which is actually quite important and could become a safety factor, is these rear U-joints. Those U-joints, when they start to wear out, they can cause a clunking or a shudder-type vibration that you can get noticeably from the rear end on this. You can imagine if that U-joint can move around just like this without any resistance, that's a good sign they're bad. What we don't want to happen is this U-joint to totally come apart, as you can see here. Now this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle driveline, actually off a four-wheel drive Jeep, but the principle is the same. It is a joint, and over time, as that joint starts to spin and turn, you can wear out the little needle bearings that are seated in this cup. The next part of this project on the 76 Vet is to take care of this leaky power steering control valve. You know, the client's having to top off the power steering fluid on a daily basis, and that gets to be old. The other fact is it creates a lot of slop in the steering, so we're going to replace this whole power steering control valve. It's pretty easy, in and out. Now on some occasions you can find a rebuild kit or an upgraded kit to actually put a rack and pinion. We're not going to go that far on this build. We want to stay within budget. So we got that drive line back in place for the rear U-joints, nice and solid, no more noise in that back. It's going to be really good. One of the last portions of this Vet build is this radiator. The radiator is leaking from the tank. You can see where all that coolant is just dripping out. So we're going to get this radiator replaced, throw on some rubber radiator hoses, and then we'll be pretty much done with this 76 Vet. So this 76 Vet was buku fun to work on. If you've got a classic car, email me, frank@desertcarcare.com. Come on down to the garage. We'll kind of do a bumper-to-bumper review, meet up what your needs and goals are so we can get your classic car on the road. I'm Frank. It was a pleasure hanging out again on this series of Inside the Garage.